Luis said. "Fiona, be my girlfriend. Let me take care of you." He kept his promise. For the next 8 years, he treated me well. He was my boyfriend for 6 years, then my husband for 2 years. He almost became a father. Unfortunately, I had an early delivery, and I died on the operating table, along with the child. Before I died, Luis, with bloodshot eyes, held my hand. He pleaded, "You can't die. You can't leave me alone. If you die, what will I do?" Chapter 1. I thought I was dead, but when I opened my eyes, I saw Luis again, still his younger, inexperienced self. He said, "Fiona, be my girlfriend. Let me take care of you." His tone was calm, his expression indifferent, and there was no anticipation or nervousness in his eyes. It wasn't as if he was confessing his love. It felt more like he was fulfilling a task. Because he didn't love me, the one he loved was my sister, and my sister was dying. The only thing she couldn't let go of was me. So Luis took me, this burden, upon himself and carried it for 8 years. Looking at him now, I suddenly remembered something his friend asked him when we got married. "Is it really necessary? Your sister-in-law's been gone for 5 years. Are you really planning to throw your whole life away for this?" Luis was smoking, and through the misty haze of smoke, he said, "A lifetime is a promise, not a second less." He had promised my sister, "Don't worry, I will take good care of Fiona." For a lifetime. I took a deep breath. In my last life, I lived the way everyone expected me to. This time around, things ought to be different. Brother Luis, there's no need for this. I can take care of myself. You don't need to trouble yourself. Luis seemed unprepared for my rejection. His eyebrows furrowed deeply, and his eyes looked at me intensely. "Fiona," he was about to say something, but I interrupted him. "Brother Luis, I'm going to visit my sister. Are you coming?" Luis's right thumb rubbed against his middle finger. That was the telltale sign of his craving for a cigarette. "You go ahead first. I'll come later." Chapter 2. I am 18 years old now, in my senior year of high school. In less than a year, I'll be taking my college entrance exams. In my last life, I missed that opportunity, because 3 months before my exams, my sister died. My mother tore up all my textbooks in a fit of rage. "Do you have no heart? Helen is gone, and you still have the mind to study? Helen is dead. Why are you still alive?" During the exam days, she locked me inside the house. She said, Helen's biggest regret in this life was that she couldn't take the college entrance exams. "If you can't do anything for her, at least don't make her sad in heaven." At that time, I thought she wanted me to die. Not only did she lock me in, but she also didn't give me anything to eat or drink. In the end, it was Luis who broke in and took me away. To be honest, I wasn't ready to see them again, so I hid in the corner until my mother left my sister's hospital room before I went in. Luis was inside. Seeing me, he frowned and said, "Where have you been? Why are you just getting here?" I ignored him and looked straight at my sister. A surge of warmth rose from my heart and reached my eyes. 7 years. I missed her so much. She gently patted Luis and said angrily, "Why are you being so harsh?" Then she beckoned to me. "Fiona, come here. Fiona, come here, and I'll give you candy. Fiona, come here, and I'll tell you a story. Fiona, come here. Don't be afraid. Sister's here. Fiona, come here. Let me give you a hug. Fiona, I'm leaving. What will my darling do?" I quickly walked over and knelt by her bedside. I reached out and gently wrapped my arms around her slender waist. I buried my head on her legs. Tears finally fell uncontrollably. I sobbed softly, as if I had suffered a great injustice. "What happened? Fiona, what's wrong? Who bullied you? Fiona, don't cry. Tell me what happened. Fiona, don't be afraid. I'm here. I'm here." Chapter 3. My name is Fiona. It was my sister who named me Fiona. She wished me, full of life. My sister's name is Helen, and I was born for her. My sister was diagnosed with leukemia when she was 6 years old. In my country, every year, millions of patients with blood disorders await stem cell transplants. but only 0.3% of them received treatment annually. Helen wasn't one of them. Helpless. The doctor suggested my parents have another child and use the second child's umbilical cord blood for a bone marrow match. The doctor said, the matching success rate is very high. The doctor said it was very high, but in my parents' ears, it meant 100%. Without hesitation, they made that choice. After 10 months of pregnancy and a single day of labor, I was the one born. Everyone hoped. Everyone was excited. But the match failed, and a transplant wasn't possible. They had given birth to something useless. The child born for Helen was useless. My mother, devastated, suffered postpartum hemorrhage. Her body was severely damaged and she could no longer have children. Fortunately, half a year later, they found a match for Helen's stem cell transplant from the umbilical cord blood bank. Helen was saved. Luckily. Otherwise, my mother would have died. She said, if Helen dies, I can't go on living. As for me, I was just a useless failure. 18 years ago, my umbilical cord blood didn't match. 18 years later, my kidney didn't match either. End-stage renal disease. Helen was dying. Chapter 4. My sister pushed Luis out of the room. She pulled me away from her embrace. While wiping away my tears, she gently asked, is it because of Luis? He said he confessed to you, but you rejected him. Fiona, don't you want Luis to take care of you? You know that Luis would take good care of you. Of course I knew. In this world, whenever danger came, the only person who would shield me first was Luis. Since I started elementary school, he had always picked me up and dropped me off. No matter the weather, even if it meant being late or skipping school himself, he never missed picking me up. He would fight for me. He would tell others, she's my sister. No one can bully her. When I fell, he would carry me. When I was sick, he took care of me. When I was hungry, he cooked for me. He even explained my first period to me. Once, when he was drunk, he pressed his finger against my forehead and said, I'm playing dad without the perks here. He said, Fiona, I raised you. I was raised by Luis. I knew that his care for me was not only because of Helen's request. He genuinely treated me like his sister. Luis is my brother. Sis, I like him being my brother. My sister looked at me with a complicated expression. Fiona, your brother can't take care of you for your whole life, only your partner can. I avoided her gaze and lowered my head. But he's my brother. After a long time, my sister sighed. Aw, I'm rushing things. Forget it. You two can take your time. He will still take good care of you. I vaguely mumbled in agreement. Sis, I'll come to see you every day, okay? My sister's eyes lit up, but quickly dimmed again. No need to trouble yourself. Focus on your studies. My father and mother did not want me to appear in front of my sister frequently. My mother said, why are you going there? To upset Helen? Do you think she'll be happy to see you healthy, running, and jumping? My sister said she was happy and wanted to see me, but my parents didn't believe it. They stubbornly believed that all my sister's care for me was at the expense of her own feelings. They wouldn't allow Helen to feel even a bit wronged because of Fiona. Aw, your grades. She poked my forehead. Little one, do you think you can get into college? My grades were poor, or even very bad, at least on the surface. I shrank my neck, smiling, and asked, Sis, which college do you want me to attend? My sister blurted out, of course the best one. Realizing what she had said, she quickly changed her words. But do what you can. Don't push yourself. Whatever college you can get into, we'll go to that one. As we were talking, the door behind us suddenly opened. Helen! That familiar yet unfamiliar voice called out. It was familiar because it was my mother's voice. It was unfamiliar because I hadn't heard it in 6 years. My mother had fulfilled her promise. Without Helen, she couldn't go on living. She held on for a year, and eventually drank a bottle of pesticide. When I heard the news, I felt lost. I didn't know how to react or what to feel. Maybe, from beginning to end, she was only Helen's mother. She seemed not to see me at all. Walking right past me, she quickly stepped forward to adjust the height of the hospital bed. She lowered her voice and said gently, Why are you sitting up? Lie down. Aren't you tired? My sister replied helplessly. Mom, I'm fine. Weren't you going home to cook? Why are you back suddenly? My mother said. Your father called me. He said he's bringing it over. Dad's back from his business trip? Yes. And he said he brought you a gift. Great. Fiona is here too. We can all be together. My mother interrupted her. She said flatly, Luis, thank you for visiting Helen, but she needs to rest now. You two should leave. She didn't look at me once. From start to finish, I thought I had gotten used to it. But at that moment, I found it hard to breathe. I stood there, frozen, until a large hand wrapped around my clenched fist. It was Luis. He said, Auntie, I'm taking Fiona home. Chapter 5. Since I was young, I knew my parents didn't like me. What I knew even earlier than that was that my grandparents didn't like me either. Maybe because I had never been loved. I had no expectations when I came back to them. My mother had many rules for me. For example, I couldn't wear beautiful, bright-colored clothes. For example, I couldn't eat any snacks apart from the main meals. For example, I couldn't laugh. For example, I couldn't excel at school. From the same mother, if Helen was stuck in a sickbed, then Fiona couldn't live well otherwise. How sad would Helen be? What's with you today? Luis looked at me intently. I shook my head. Luis, can I move in with you? Ever since Luis graduated from college and started working, he had rented an apartment. He had offered for me to move in with him, but I had refused. I could imagine what they would say if I moved out. But this time, no matter what they said, I had to leave. Luis was stunned for a moment. In a low voice, he asked, Fiona, what's really going on? Who's giving you trouble? I shook my head and pressed. Can't I? Luis stayed silent for a long while, then finally sighed. He pushed me forward. Come on, let's go pack your things. Packing wasn't difficult, as I didn't have many belongings, just some books and a few changes of clothes. Since we started packing, Luis had a frown on his face. Once we were ready to leave, he said, in a not very pleasant tone, to the mall. This time, I didn't refuse. Thank you, Luis. His expression finally softened. All right, let's get our Fiona some pretty clothes. Luis was very enthusiastic. He took me shopping for clothes, then took me out for a barbecue, and finally went to the supermarket to buy me a bunch of snacks and daily necessities. I hadn't been this comfortable around him for a long time. In the previous life, when he confessed his feelings to me, I agreed, but from that point on, we could never go back to how things were. The shift in our relationship made it hard for us to know how to act around each other, and we struggled for a long time. So, in the end, he was meant to be my brother. Chapter 6. The next day, I wore the dress Luis bought me to the hospital. My sister was surprised to see me, and there was a sparkle in her eyes I had never seen before. Beautiful. Our Fiona is really gorgeous. Did Luis buy it for you? He has good taste. My sister held my hand and carefully pulled a box of chocolates out from under her pillow. It was exactly the same as in the previous life. Fiona, eat this. They say this is the best chocolate. In my last life, I never got to eat it. Because of the thoughts my parents had instilled in me, I would never eat anything in front of my sister. So, in my last life, I brought it home. Mother found it. She cried and slapped me. Fiona, will you die if you don't eat? Making Helen trick Dad into buying you food? Do you know that this box of chocolates costs as much as one dialysis session for Helen? Thinking about those past events, I didn't feel much now. I unwrapped a piece of chocolate and put it in my mouth. Sweet, with a bit of bitterness, smooth and fragrant. I nodded with a smile. It's delicious. My sister's eyes curved into a smile as well. Leave it with Luis, and ask him for it whenever you want to eat some. I'll keep it here with you, I said. But, sis, I want to take a break from school. My sister stared at me, stunned. What are you saying? Did something happen at school? I shook my head. I want to stay with you in the hospital. You can come after school. It's not enough. It seemed like my sister understood what I meant. She looked at me sadly. Fiona, you need to live your own life. Study well. get into college, and move out of this house. She tugged her lips into a small smile. Mom and Dad are here with me. You don't need to worry. I'm fine. I insisted. I only want to take a break for 6 months. I'll continue to study on my own and then take the college entrance exams. I smiled. I'll come back as the top scorer. All right? My sister didn't smile. She looked serious. Fiona, what's really going on? You're worrying me. The phrase I had heard the most these past days was "what's going on with you?" I lowered my gaze. I just feel like I haven't done anything wrong. I want to be here with you. I want to see you every day. I want to take care of you. My sister went silent. After a long time, she grabbed my hand and said firmly, "All right. We'll be together every day." Chapter 7. Mother arrived sooner than we expected. Seeing my clothes, her already stern face darkened even more, but she still forced a smile when she spoke to my sister. "Helen, you should rest now. Mom has something to say to Fiona." My sister didn't let go of my hand. "What is it? What happened?" "Nothing. Don't worry about it." She then turned to me. "Fiona, come with me." "Mom, Fiona isn't leaving. Whatever it is, just say it here. Helen, be good." She spoke more firmly. "Fiona, come out with me. Are you really going to disturb your sister's rest?" My sister was about to say something, but I squeezed her hand gently. "What do you want to say to me?" I asked. "Is it about me moving out? Or me coming to see my sister? Or maybe about me wearing new clothes?" "Fiona," my mother scolded in a low voice, "you're young and already up to no good. Living with a man, do you not have any shame?" "Mom, what are you talking about? I'm not living with a man. It's Luis. He's like an older brother to Fiona." "Ha, an older brother?" My mother sneered. "Is there any blood relation?" "No. There's no blood relation," I said, "but I will be staying there for a while. I have already applied to take a break from school. From today on, I will come to the hospital every day to take care of my sister." "I don't agree." Mother's voice suddenly rose. "You're moving back, and you're going to school like you're supposed to. Helen is still sick. What kind of nonsense are you pulling?" I looked at her and said calmly, "I'm not asking for your permission. I'm informing you." "Fiona, what exactly are you trying to do?" "Enough." My sister's frail voice cut in forcefully. She looked pale, almost ready to collapse. "Helen, what's wrong?" Mother's face filled with worry, her hands trembling slightly as she looked helplessly at my sister. "Mom, I don't have much time left. I want Fiona to stay with me. Please, can you agree just this once?" My sister's voice was weak but determined. Mother's eyes turned red. "Helen, what nonsense are you talking about? What do you mean you don't have much time? Are you trying to stab me in the heart?" "Mom, just agree with me this time. Please." "Mom will agree. Mom will agree to anything. Just stop saying these things. I can't take it. I can't bear it." After all this fuss, my sister quickly fell asleep. Mother gently stroked her forehead and tucked the blanket around her. Then she turned to look at me, her eyes cold. "Fiona, are you taking revenge on me? Is that it?" "What?" I was stunned, not expecting her to say something like that. "You're using Helen to get back at me. You want to see her in pain. See me in pain. Does that make you happy?" Suddenly, I laughed. In my previous life, a therapist once asked me, "Do you hate your parents?" I shook my head and said I didn't. She asked me why. I said, "I understand them. To them, my sister is their real child. I was born simply to extend her life. Unfortunately, things didn't go as they hoped, and I let them down." Nobody is perfect. With extreme expectations come crushing disappointments. And that kind of disparity can make people do irrational things. Everything they did to me afterward was because they truly thought it was good for my sister. They didn't realize it was wrong. I even enthusiastically explained to her. This kind of situation is actually quite common. It's like parents who physically discipline their children once there's a first time. There will be countless more. And it only escalates. Do you know why? It's because, in a parent-child relationship, parents hold an absolutely dominant position. There's no cost to their actions toward their children. Not only do they lose nothing, but they also achieve their goal. So why wouldn't they? Absolute power leads to absolute tyranny. and they simply don't realize they're in the wrong. At that time, my therapist looked at me with pity in her eyes. Later, I overheard her talking to Luis on the phone. She said that I chose emotional detachment under extreme pain. I didn't agree, but now, it seemed that maybe I was indeed mistaken. She said I was taking revenge on her, so she knew all along that what she did could make me resent her. Suddenly, I had a moment of clarity. Since we both understood the truth, we could speak logically. I said, a normal adult male ejaculates 2 to 6 milliliters of semen each time. The sperm count per milliliter is more than 60 million, meaning each ejaculation contains between 120 million to 360 million sperm. About 60% of them are viable, which comes to between 72 million to 216 million. Let's use the average, 150 million. A normal adult female releases 1 egg during ovulation. Sometimes 2 or 3. Let's take the average, 2 eggs. In such a situation, the probability of 1 sperm and 1 egg meeting is 1 in 75 million. What nonsense are you talking about? My mother interrupted me. I continued. Of course. This is an ideal statistic. What I'm trying to say is that if it had happened a day earlier or a day later, a minute earlier or a minute later, if it had been a different sperm and a different egg, then I wouldn't exist. I was brought into this world not by my choice. The genetic chain I possess is given by you, formed by the combination of your sperm and egg, with odds of 1 in tens of millions. I am not guilty. There is no sin on me. Chapter 8. When I was 8 years old, my sister's leukemia relapsed. She was rushed into the emergency room, and my mother knelt to pray. I shivered in the corner. Father held mother in his arms as she broke down and cried. Why was it her? If it had been a different child, Helen wouldn't have had to suffer like this. Why her? Why did we have to give birth to her? Is she sent by heaven to torment us? Why does everyone else's cord blood work, but hers doesn't? Why did I have to give birth to her? It was the first time I directly faced my mother's hatred. Even though I was already used to their indifference, I still felt hurt at that moment. Later, Luis arrived. He covered my ears and held me close. The warmth of his embrace drove away the chill that came from the depths of my heart. He said, Fiona, don't listen. I'm here. Chapter 9. My resistance seemed to have had a huge impact on my mother. Eventually, we reached a compromise. I would come to see my sister every day, but my visits would be at a different time from hers. She agreed. Neither of us wanted to see our sister caught between us. Feeling torn. As for my relationship with them, some things were irreconcilable. After leaving the hospital, I returned to the rental apartment. Luis hadn't come back yet, so I took some ingredients from the fridge and started cooking dinner. By the time I finished the last dish, the front door opened from the outside. Luis, dinner is ready. Luis changed his shoes and casually asked, takeout? I made it. Luis didn't believe it. You can cook? Since when? Of course. He didn't know. After all, it was a skill I learned in my previous life. I mumbled. I've always known how to cook. Come on, let's eat. Luis seemed to think of something, and he gently ruffled my hair. Yeah, let's eat. Cook whenever you feel like it. But if you don't, just buy something from outside. Okay. Make more of what you like. Don't you love spicy food? I don't see anything spicy on this table. I swallowed the food in my mouth and said, healthy. Luis was half amused, half baffled. Strange. I didn't expect to hear those words coming from you. I smiled and didn't say anything more. He sighed. Well, it's good. Take care of yourself. You're too thin. My life became more routine after that. Every morning, I'd wake up and go for a run, then bring some breakfast for Luis. As for myself, I'd cook at home. Once, Luis curiously tasted my breakfast. His expression was indescribable. Is this good? I said. Healthy. He shook his head. I really don't understand what you kids think sometimes. After breakfast, I'd dive into practice problems. An hour and a half later, I'd head to the hospital and stay until around 12:30. That was the time they allowed me. I often brought a book to read to my sister, and afterward, I'd wheel her down to the garden for a walk. Sometimes we'd run into familiar doctors, nurses, or patience. They'd ask who I was. My sister would reply, "My sister. She's a lovely sister." My sister would nod proudly, "Yes." At noon, I would leave before Mother came to bring my sister her lunch. Each time, my sister would feel so sad. She hoped that I could get along peacefully with our parents. But despite all her efforts, she knew it was impossible. I could only comfort her. "I'm not sad as long as I can see you every day. I'm not sad at all," and I truly wasn't sad. "I'll cook for myself everything I like to eat. I eat until I'm full and even take a nap afterward." I said, "Look, I've gained weight." My sister pinched my cheek. "You've put on some flesh. And you look healthier too. Good job." My sister was delighted to see me getting better day by day, while Luis's face grew heavier with each passing day. That night, Luis had a few drinks, just slightly tipsy, and was standing alone on the balcony smoking. I saw him when I came out to get some milk before bed. "Luis, go to bed early. I'm heading back in." "Wait there." He stubbed out the cigarette and fanned away the smoke from his body. He walked back in and looked me over. After a while, he said, "Fiona, be honest with me. What exactly are you up to?" The tone made me feel like I was a villain plotting some kind of big plan. I asked innocently, "What did I do?" He impatiently clicked his tongue and raised his hand to lightly push my forehead. "I raised you. I know you even better than your sister does. Don't think you can fool me." I sighed in resignation. "I work out every day. Study hard. Eat properly. What's wrong with that?" He frowned. "Nothing's wrong. These are all things I've always wanted you to do. But the fact that you suddenly do them all makes me worried. Fiona, I'm really worried about you." He really was drunk. Otherwise, someone as emotionally reserved as him wouldn't say such things when sober. I sighed. "Luis, I'm really doing well, honestly. I've never been better. I'm happy. Every single day. Truly." Luis suddenly hugged me, patting my back just like he used to when I was little. He said, "Fiona, no matter what happens, tell me right away, okay?" Okay. Chapter 10. The universe must be the cruelest thing in existence. Just when you think life will continue happily ever after, it always shows up and shatters that illusion. My sister was rushed into the emergency room once again. Just moments before, we had been talking about knitting scarves, when suddenly, she collapsed. Mother arrived and immediately slapped me. She demanded angrily, "Fiona, what did you do to Helen?" She cursed me. "If anything happens to Helen, I won't let you go." She moved too quickly. Luis only had time to pull me behind him. He stormed forward in a fury. I grabbed his arm and shook my head at him. He touched my cheek, his face dark with anger. "Does it hurt?" I winced. It really did hurt. Mother was still cursing me, saying that while my sister's health declined, I only took better care of myself, accusing me of doing it deliberately. She said I was trying to get back at them. She said, "Why is it Helen who suffers, and not you?" It was obvious she wasn't in the right state of mind. Luis gave her a cold look and pulled me to the side. Trying to argue with someone in such a rage was pointless. Father held Mother in his arms. He didn't even look at me or say anything at all. When facing me, my mother still had emotions like anger and hatred. But my father was much more indifferent. To him, it seemed I was like air. The last time I saw him in my past life was at the hospital. Alcohol poisoning. When he saw me, he wasn't surprised at all. He said, "If there's ever another call about me, don't bother. I didn't raise you as a child, and I don't need you to care for me in my old age." He was always very clear-headed. Clear-headed in his disregard for me. Luis bought a bottle of ice water to help with my face. He comforted me. "It's going to be all right." I nodded, smiling to go along with him. "Right. It's going to be all right." Of course, it would be all right. I knew better than anyone, it wasn't time yet. Luis took my hand, prying open my tightly clenched fist, where my nails had already dug deep into my palm, leaving bloody marks. He said, "If you don't feel like smiling, then don't. It looks ugly." The emotions I had been holding back felt like they were suddenly pierced. I let out small, broken sobs. I was scared, even knowing it wasn't time. I was still scared. My sister was rescued. She was placed in the ICU, and it took half a month for her to be transferred to a general ward. During this time, I was not allowed to visit her. My father said, "Don't come, you can't help, and it's better not to make her more distressed." I accepted this. While my sister was still in a coma, there wasn't much I could do to help. There was no need to add more trouble just to put my own heart at ease. My sister would be all right, and I had more important things to do. I needed to keep working out, studying hard, and eating well. Luis became more and more silent. The smell of smoke on him grew stronger, and the shadows under his eyes darkened. I knew he couldn't sleep. He would always get up in the middle of the night to drink and numb himself. Just like the last time, the suffocating feeling was pulling everyone down. But thankfully, after the rain, there was always sunshine. My sister woke up. Chapter 11. Were you scared? My sister gently touched my head and asked softly, leaning against her bed. I shook my head. No, I knew you'd be fine. You've lost weight again, she said. Here, eat some candy. She opened her hand to reveal a piece of fruit candy. Her eyes curved into a smile. The doctor came for his rounds earlier, and I asked him for it. My nose tingled with emotion. It was just like when we were little. She couldn't eat candy, but she would always find a way to get the doctor or nurse to give her one. Then, she'd hide it and give it to me when I came. I'm all grown up now. I said that, but still took the candy. My sister gave a small smile. No matter how grown up, you're still my baby. Did Mom give you a hard time? She asked. I shook my head. No, don't worry about it. She didn't believe that. Of course. Don't hate her. My illness has almost driven her insane. She's not trying to make things hard for you. She's struggling against everyone, including herself. I know that. Just like how she wouldn't let me eat meat or gain weight, hoping I'd look sickly, as if that would make up for my sister. But in truth, she treated herself the same way. She never touched the food my sister couldn't eat. When my sister could only eat liquid food, my mother barely drank anything herself. She was like an ascetic monk. In her own words, Helen is suffering. If we can't take her place, the least we can do is suffer with her. When my sister fell ill while I was with her, my mother would hit me. When my sister fell ill while my mother was with her, she would hit herself too. She unfairly mistreated everyone except my sister. I know. Don't worry. While we spoke, Luis arrived. He brought a spider plant, my sister's favorite. Compared to colorful flowers, my sister preferred the lush green. My sister looked at him with amusement. How come you look skinnier than Fiona? I took the opportunity to complain. He doesn't eat or sleep properly. Luis shot me a glare. Am I a god or something? But my sister looked at him, her expression complex. She opened her mouth, then turned to me. Fiona, go outside for a while. I need to talk to Luis. I nodded and left the room. I knew what they would talk about. My sister was definitely comforting him, telling him not to feel guilty, not to blame himself. I used to think that what tormented him was longing, but later, I realized that those years, he seemed to live even more hopelessly. Chapter 12. As the weather gradually cooled, my sister's health slowly improved, but my parents' mood became increasingly despondent. More than once, I saw them arguing with the doctor, demanding to know when they could find a suitable kidney donor. More than once, I also saw them pleading with the doctor to save their daughter. My sister, on the other hand, remained calm. The scarf I was knitting for her was nearly complete. She was delighted. It'll be ready just in time for the colder weather. I suddenly said, Sis, when spring comes, let's go on a trip. A trip? My sister's eyes lit up with excitement. Where to? Wherever you want to go. She thought for a moment, then shook her head. I don't know where's best. Everywhere seems good. Luis suggested. Yunnan? Is it beautiful there? Yes, it's beautiful. He pulled out his phone. Let me look it up. My sister laughed. You're serious? I'll pass. But you can take Fiona, and send me pictures when you get there. We're going together. I grabbed her hand. Her smile slowly faded. Mom and Dad won't agree to it. I said. Then I'll take you away. We'll run away together. My sister made a face. as if she couldn't believe what I was saying. Nonsense. She turned to Luis. Aren't you going to do anything about her? Luis looked up and said, I'll keep watch. We burst into laughter. The good news came on a Thursday, clear skies, a gentle breeze, perfect weather. I was doing practice problems when I received a call from my sister. Choked with emotion, she said, Fiona, they found a kidney. Once the surgery's over, we're going to Yunnan. All right? I smiled and said, all right. The timing of this kidney being available was perfect. My sister's body was able to handle the surgery, and her condition hadn't deteriorated to its worst. Everything was as perfect as it could be. My sister was overjoyed. She excitedly talked about what she wanted to do after the surgery, sounding like a child. My parents watched her, indulgent, and for the first time, my presence didn't prompt their harsh words. Luis stood at the back, silent. When my sister finally fell asleep, he pulled me out of the hospital. He didn't say a word all the way home. Once we got back, he questioned me. Fiona, whose kidney is being donated to Helen? I sighed. I knew he wouldn't let it go. How would I know? I replied, exasperated. The doctor said that the donor's identity is confidential. He stared at me intently. How did you know? I sighed again. I knew I couldn't hide it from him. Know what? I said. That my kidney matches my sister's? So it is yours. Luis looked as though the energy had drained out of him. He collapsed onto the sofa. Yes. If you didn't already know, you would have cried today. But today, from beginning to end, you were smiling, as if everything had gone just as you planned. So all that effort, working out, eating well, it was all for pre-surgery preparation, wasn't it? And I didn't even notice. Luis gave a self-deprecating laugh. You've really grown up. Such a big decision, and you didn't need to consult anyone. You just decided on your own. Fiona, you're impressive, but I don't agree. And Helen wouldn't agree either. Then we won't tell her. She doesn't need to know. Luis looked at me, his eyes searching. Fiona, do you even know what you're doing? I know what I'm doing, and I know what Luis is afraid of. Just like last time. It was during my 8th month of pregnancy. I missed my sister so much. When I saw that old and used laptop in the storage room, I just wanted to try to see if there were any traces of my sister in it. I opened folder after folder, from the C drive to the D drive, and in the end, I actually found something. There were pictures saved in there, images Luis had cached while chatting with my sister, landscapes, expressions, and my sister. She was wearing an oxygen tube on her nose, smiling happily at the camera, flashing a peace sign. There was also that successful kidney match report stored there. It flashed by, and I almost didn't notice, until I flipped back 3 or 4 images. I froze. I quickly scrolled back. I remembered that report. I remembered that the result on the report I had seen before was a mismatch. It was supposed to be a mismatch, but why did this one say it was a match? What are you looking at? I've been calling you for ages, and you didn't answer. Luis walked in. He saw what I was seeing. I looked at him, helpless, hoping he could give me an answer. The fear on his face was the best answer. So it was true. Why? Why did they lie to me? I could have saved my sister. In the ambulance, I kept asking him in a daze. Why? 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 And that's what I want to ask him now. Why? Why did you and my sister lie to me? I squatted in front of Luis. He looked at me, reached up, and tucked the loose strands of my hair behind my ear. He said, Helen's body was already at its limit. It wasn't something that could be fixed just by replacing a kidney. Even if you gave her yours, it would only be temporary. Her entire body was failing. But it was your kidney, and it affected your entire future. Your long life. To use your kidney just to sustain her for a year or so, we felt it wasn't worth it. So that's how it was. That heavy weight in my chest finally dissipated. If my kidney could give my sister 6 more months of life, then it's worth it. If it could give her a year, then I'd be the one gaining. If it gave her 2 years, I'd be so happy I'd laugh in my dreams. And what about you? What would happen to you? Your health isn't good to begin with. What if something went wrong during or after the surgery? It's all right. I can handle it. Hospitals aren't shady workshops. If I wasn't suitable for surgery, they wouldn't approve it either. This time, I went straight to the doctor as soon as I could. At first, he denied it. Later, I threatened to report him. He sighed. You sisters really are born of the same mother. And after that? Luis asked. Early to bed, early to rise, a good diet, a healthy life. How great would that be? But what if? That's Helen. Isn't Helen worth more than a what if? They all thought it wasn't worth it to use my kidney to buy my sister a year or so. But that's not how I see it. That was my sister, the one who treated me like her treasure. If it meant she could live one more day, how could it not be worth it? In the end, Luis was convinced. I actually understood. He didn't know how to make a choice. It felt like anything he decided would be wrong. That's why, after my sister passed away, he felt so much guilt and remorse. Chapter 13. Tuesday. Light rain, the day of my sister's kidney transplant surgery. I couldn't take her inside. I could only wait for her in the operating room. Through the partition curtain, I heard my sister's voice. She asked, "Doctor, how long will the surgery take?" The doctor replied, "At most 4 hours, it'll be very quick. You just have to take a nap. Don't be scared." She laughed a bit. "I'm not scared. I'm very happy." "What do you plan to do after the surgery?" the doctor asked. She said, "Travel to Yunnan." I promised my sister. I closed my eyes contentedly. This life was better than the last one. I was very happy. I had a very long dream. I dreamed of meeting my sister for the first time. I was 4 years old then. Before I got close to her, my life was bleak, without any color, until she handed me a pack of candies, colorful wrappers, different flavors, sweet from my mouth all the way to my heart. She said, "Fiona, eat candy. In the future, I'll always give you candy." I held my sister's hand as we walked forward, but she kept disappearing. I couldn't find her, so I stood there, obediently, waiting for her to come to me. Later, she brought me to a boy. She told me, "Fiona, this is Luis. He will take care of you and protect you on my behalf." All right? Not all right. I only wanted my sister, but no one ever taught me how to say no. I was scared of that brother. He didn't talk much, and he never smiled, until one day, during a thunderstorm, I was frightened and grabbed his clothes. He suddenly squatted down and said, "Hop on, I'll carry you." He carried me, and I held the umbrella, trying my best to keep him dry, but my own back ended up completely soaked. He looked at me helplessly, putting his jacket on me as he said, "Fiona, you have to learn to protect yourself. You are the most important." I was the most important? That was the first time anyone ever said something like that to me. "Fiona, Fiona." Someone was calling me, the one who would call me to school, pick me up after, and take me home. I struggled to open my eyes. "Luis." I opened my mouth, wanting to ask him, but I couldn't make a sound. He comforted me. "Helen is fine. The surgery was successful. She's still unconscious. But don't worry, rest well." Finally, I breathed a sigh of relief. After a long while, I finally found my voice. "When will my sister wake up?" Luis glared at me. "Don't even think about it." I was helpless. I wasn't there when she went into the operating room. And if she wakes up without seeing me, she'll overthink things. Luis frowned. "Don't worry. They'll handle it." When Helen asked about you as she went in, they told her it was their decision not to let you come. They should understand by now. Whether they understood or not didn't matter to me. None of this was done for them, but from beginning to end, they hadn't even looked at Fiona. That's what Luis was holding on to. I owed in response, reassured. No matter how they acted, they wouldn't let my sister be sad. As for their attitude toward me, I didn't care. The next time I saw my sister was a week later. In 1 week, I could already get up and walk, but she still had to lie in the hospital bed. However, she looked much better, her eyes full of joy she couldn't hide. She was so happy. "Fiona, come here," she said. "Mom promised me that if I behaved and recovered well, she would agree to let us travel." "Fiona, we can go to Yunnan." Yes, we could go to Yunnan. She spent the entire winter in bed. When spring arrived, she wore the scarf I had knitted for her. Luis pulled our luggage, and we set off on our journey to Yunnan. Extra Story 1, Helen's Perspective. Chapter 1. When my little sister was born, everyone was full of expectations. They all waited for the cord blood matching results. Only Helen was looking forward to the baby sister herself. Helen was the first one to rush to her sister's side. The little one was so tiny and a bit ugly, but Helen loved her very much. She wanted to reach out and touch the little creature, but the baby immediately grabbed her finger. Soft, warm. Helen smiled happily. Chapter 2. Her sister was sent away. Helen asked her mom, "Where did the baby go?" Mom replied, "There's no one to take care of her, so she was sent to Grandma and Grandpa." Helen was very understanding. She knew her illness required constant care, and Dad had to work. Grandma and Grandpa would surely take good care of the baby sister. After all, she was so adorable. But when they went back to Grandma and Grandpa's for New Year's, her sister was dirty and even smelled bad. She was crawling on the floor in thin clothes, and nobody was paying attention to her. Helen felt deeply upset. She cried and begged her mom to bring her sister back home. But Mom said, "She's fine. Don't worry. That's how all kids get through it." Chapter 3. Helplessness. At 7 years old, Helen experienced helplessness. There was nothing she could do. Even crying and throwing a tantrum was useless. She didn't understand why her mom didn't love her own child. Later, her condition worsened. Day after day of chemotherapy and medication, she writhed in pain on her bed. Looking at the green grass, she said, "Mom, let's call my sister Fiona, okay?" Chapter 4. Helen brought up taking her sister back again and again. Her sister needed to go to kindergarten. She needed to be with her mom and dad. Helen said so many things. Mom always had the same response. "She's fine. Don't worry." Helen didn't know what else to do. She decided to ask Luis. Luis was so smart. He always came first in every exam. Everyone knew that. He must have a solution. Later, he said, "She needs to have value to come back. It's not about what she needs. It's about what she offers. Otherwise, she's just a burden, and burdens are thrown away." That was the first time Helen faced the cold indifference of her parents. Luis was not wrong, but Helen was still very sad. Mom and Dad didn't love her sister. She didn't want to accept it, but she had to. When she got home, she told her mom, "I'm so lonely. Mom, please bring my sister back. She can play with me and help out around the house." Chapter 5. Helen thought that even if her parents didn't love Fiona, she could still take good care of Fiona, but her health was too poor. That time, she was hospitalized with acute gastroenteritis, vomiting and having diarrhea. Mom and Dad stayed with her at the hospital for the whole night, and nobody remembered Fiona. When they returned home, Fiona was already unconscious outside the door, cold, hungry, alone in the darkness. She shivered and curled up in a corner for the entire night. No one came for her. So, Helen entrusted Fiona to Luis. She hoped Luis would take care of her precious sister. Chapter 6. For Helen, being alive was a painful thing. When she was very young, she thought that maybe death was a form of release. But then Fiona came. She kept thinking that if she died, what would happen to her little sister? Fortunately, Luis kept his promise. He stood firmly by Fiona's side, even when the other side of the scale weighed Helen. Chapter 7. She was glad that Fiona's cord blood didn't match with hers. If she had to rely on consuming Fiona's life to extend her own, she would rather die sooner. She would never allow Fiona to give up her kidney just for her to live another year or so. Chapter 8. But Helen still wanted to live. Fiona said she would win a championship for her. Fiona wanted to travel with her. Helen wanted to send Fiona to college. If there was only Fiona and no one to send her off, what if others bullied her? Thankfully, heaven had mercy on her. She was able to do all those things. Luis took Fiona and her to Yunnan. What a beautiful place that was. They biked around Arai Lake. They visited Shizhou ancient town. And they saw the colorful blooms at Rainbow Farm. It was the first time she shared a bed with Fiona. Fiona curled up next to her, clutching the edge of her shirt, just that made her feel she could smile even in her sleep. Those 10 days were worth a lifetime. Chapter 9. Fiona was amazing. She said she would get first place for Helen. And she really got in. She chose the best university. And Helen was the one to see her off. Helen was a bit worried. She wasn't attractive, thin and frail, and clearly sick. She was afraid she would embarrass Fiona. But Fiona introduced her to her roommates without any hesitation. Helen let out a sigh of relief. She shared the snacks she had bought with everyone, hoping they would treat Fiona well. She wasn't very good with words, so all she could say to them was, "Our Fiona doesn't talk much, and she's a bit introverted. So please look out for her." Chapter 10. Did Helen have any regrets? She couldn't stay with Fiona for long. She couldn't see Fiona get married and have children. Then there were her parents. She didn't know what to do about them. She had thought about reconciling Fiona and their parents, but it wouldn't be fair to Fiona if she had to leave one wish for her parents. Besides hoping they live well, it would be that they wouldn't bother Fiona. They hadn't raised Fiona, so they shouldn't expect Fiona to care for them in their old age. Special Story 2, Luis Chapter. Luis wasn't his parents' biological child. He had been adopted from an orphanage. As an orphan, he knew his place. Be obedient. Be sensible. Don't cry or make trouble. And don't wish for things he shouldn't wish for. Actually, for the first year, his adoptive parents treated him very well, so well that he almost got lost in it. But after they had their biological child, all that was left was their sense of obligation. Luis was grateful that he had kept his place. Otherwise, being given love and then abandoned would have been even more painful. So, the first time he saw Helen, he felt a bit jealous. Helen was so happy. She had parents who loved her more than anything in the world. His first interaction with Helen was initiated by Helen herself. Helen handed Luis a candy. "I'm sick and can't eat this. Could you help me taste it and tell me what it tastes like?" Luis hesitated for a long time, but finally, under Helen's earnest gaze, he took it. Helen eagerly asked him, "Is it sweet?" Luis nodded. "Sweet? How sweet?" "Sweet like honey." "Honey? Bee honey? I've never had it. Is it very sweet?" Luis hadn't tasted honey either, but he still nodded. "Very sweet. Does eating something sweet make you feel happy?" "Happy?" Luis thought. Maybe it does. The next day, Helen came to him again, this time with a piece of bread. "Can you help me taste this bread? Is it sweet or salty?" The third day, it was a piece of cake. "Taste it. Does it taste the same as the bread from yesterday?" This wasn't about her not being able to eat, it was just an excuse for her to show him kindness. "Are you pitying me?" Luis asked. Helen looked confused. "Are you talking about these snacks? I'm sick, and I really can't eat them. They were originally meant for my sister, but Mom and Dad wouldn't bring her here. I was afraid they would expire, so I gave them to you instead. But don't worry, they're not expired." Helen was frustrated. She didn't know what she could do to bring her sister to her side. Crying didn't work. Begging didn't work. Reasoning didn't work. Once, she even got so worked up that she ended up in the hospital. Yet her parents still didn't relent. Luis quietly listened to Helen's story. When she finished, Luis said, "She has to be needed by you, not the other way around." "What?" Helen didn't understand. Luis explained. "She has to have value to be brought back. Not because she needs something, but because she can provide something. Otherwise, she's just a burden, and burdens are discarded." Hearing Luis's words, Helen was very sad. After a long silence, she nodded. "I understand." That child, whom Luis had never met, made him feel a pang of sympathy. He could imagine that the child wasn't living well, but he hadn't expected it to be this bad. The child was born for Helen, but her cord blood wasn't a match. The doctor said it was common, but Helen's family didn't accept it. Their first thought was that the child had been switched at birth. How ridiculous. They had tested the cord blood, yet they thought the child was the problem. Helen's parents even stubbornly did a paternity test. The result was obvious, but the elders in their hometown wouldn't accept the so-called scientific proof. Other people's biological children worked. So why not this one? Even if her body was biologically theirs, they believed she wasn't the same in spirit. So, giving her a bite to eat, not letting her die, was already more than enough kindness. That child was raised by the elders like livestock. At 3.5 years old, she could barely even speak. Luis couldn't bring himself to think back to the earliest days of Fiona. Every time he did, a dull pain would form in his chest. So when Helen entrusted Fiona to him, Luis agreed without hesitation. Someone once asked him whether he liked Helen or Fiona. Luis found it laughable. For people like them, just being alive was already a struggle. The idea of love? They never even thought about it. The three of them huddled together for warmth, supporting each other as they moved forward, and that alone was enough to satisfy him. But Helen's body was already at its limit. Helen said it wasn't worth it to take a kidney from Fiona just to keep her deteriorating body going. Luis silently agreed, but watching Helen gradually die left him in utter despair. Helen begged him, "Please take care of Fiona for me. Take care of her for life." He didn't need Helen to ask. That little girl, whom he had brought up himself, of course. He would take care of her for life, not a second less. But the little girl had grown up, and she had her own opinions now. She said that giving a kidney to give Helen another year or two was totally worth it. And Luis found himself unable to argue with her. He knew that as soon as she had made up her mind, there was nothing he could do to stop her. 1.5 years. To be precise, it was 1.5 years. One day, the little girl was sitting on the balcony, and Luis was terrified. His breath caught in his throat, but the little girl just smiled and said, "1.5 years, I gained so much." Luis pleaded, "Fiona, please, be good. Don't do anything." The little girl looked back at him. "Luis, don't be afraid. I won't commit suicide. I still have to stay with you. And if I die too, then what would you do?" Luis trembled as he approached, pulling the little girl away from the balcony. He said, "Right. Stay with me. You have to stay with me. After all, in this world, it would just be the two of them left."